In this episode of Throttle Stop Garage, we're going to have a look at how we install some gas springs to take the place of the old springs that were on the trunk hinges. Stay tuned. So if you joined us on the last episode, you will have seen how we took the original hinges, which got all sloppy for a variety of reasons, and I didn't fix them. Lots of comments on that last time, and the reason we didn't fix them was it's not just fixing the pivot point. If it was only fixing the pivot point, that wouldn't be too bad. Remember, we also needed to move the mount back and change around a few other things to accommodate the carbon fiber parts. But we also know that the torsion springs that used to drive this hinge up and down are way too powerful for this new lighter carbon fiber part. If you pop that trunk, the trunk's probably going to get driven up into your chin. So in order to avoid that, we'll work out the right spring rate for these gas charged springs. We'll get them installed, and that'll be one more part of this project done. So the quick recap, we had a lot of challenges and a lot of fun working inside the car, getting it all sorted out. But once it was done and we cut and chopped and welded everything together, I had a working, functioning set of hinges that made the trunk work fine. In order to get the weight that we have of any part, whether it's a trunk or a hood, I am going to film this at the hood of the car rather than the trunk of the car, because filming at the back of my car right now is virtually impossible with all the stuff that's back there. But let's just have a look at how I did that. So I've got a simple scale, Amazon for the win there. We're going to just turn that scale on. I've got a hook around the front. We've got it zeroed out. And then all I want to know is what is the weight pushing down 3.4, 3.5 kilograms. I get about 0.2 of variation out of this particular method. That was 3.4. So then we're going to measure it a bunch of times just to get a reasonable average. 3.55 that time. Okay, so that's all we need. We just need that weight. So get that weight, and we're going to put it into the calculations. Oh, the other thing you need is this distance. You need the distance from the front of the hood to the hinge point. So if you got those two things, you're ready to go. Okay, so we'll just take a quick minute and look at how we guesstimate, garage engineer, the forces that are going to be involved so that we can select the correct gas spring. All right, so let's just start with what we know. So we've got the trunk. All right, the trunk got a hinge, and that hinge has a pivot to the trunk. I've then, off camera, I've gone and measured the force required to lift that tailgate at the far end. And I calculated that at 3.2 kilograms. We can convert all this later. Let's not be upset about units. But 3.2 kilograms is what I got over here. Now that's the bare trunk. That's bare. Now the trunk itself actually has a mass of about 5.5 kilograms. So from that, we could calculate, if we wanted to, you could find out where the center of mass was, and yeah, let's not go there. Things that I haven't included are that the trunk will eventually get an upholstery panel. It's got a lid closing light plinth thing, a license plate. It doesn't have paint, etc., etc. So I'm going to round that up, because a lot of that particular mass is going to be hanging over the end. You're best to do this, if you're doing this, you're best advised to do this with the trunk fully trimmed the way it's going to be so that it'll open properly. But I'm going to guess here that this is equal to, let's add a kilogram, because most of that mass is being added out here at the end. It's not being added, well, I mean, part of it will be shared by the pivot, but we could just put that at, say, I don't know, 4.2 seems a little bit overkill, but a little overkill never hurt anyone. Okay, so I know that the distance this way for the trunk, so that distance from the pivot point to the end of the trunk is 760 millimeters. And I know that the pivot, from the pivot to the point where the cylinder is going to push, and I worked that. You would have seen me work that out with the popsicle stick of Garage Science. So I've just attached a popsicle stick, well, it's a paint stir stick here, and I've said, okay, well, relative to the deck lid and where everything is, pushing it down here is going to be the best spot for clearance and things. Okay, so that's 100 millimeters. And I didn't work that out to make the math easier, but so the distance from the pivot to where I'm pushing it is 100 millimeters, and to this we're going to attach our spring. And then this is going to attach somewhere with a bracket. There. All right. So now we get to just do the simple calculations. These ones are easy enough, so we're going to exchange this for this. We're going to watch as the units cancel themselves out, and we're not going to flip out about the fact that I'm doing this in metric, because you can do it in imperial if you like. So that's going to be 760, right? We're going to multiply that by 4.2. Okay, so that gets us the net force here. All right, so that's the torque, if you like, the pivot around that. So that's that. Then we're going to divide that by the distance. So this is what this experience is, and that's how much force we're going to need to apply to this 100 millimeter moment arm in order to push that up. So we're going to divide that by, so it just kind of worked out. With 100, it just makes it easy. And I didn't do that, again, I didn't do that purposefully. So the total that we're going to need here is, well, let's call it 32 kilograms, just round up. Again, garage engineering involves lots of rounding. So 32 kilograms. If you want that in imperial units, then we'll just times that by 2.2. So that's going to be 70 pounds total. Now, I know from my McMaster car catalog that I can get these springs in this length. In fact, I designed this in Fusion 360, and you can import directly the parts from McMaster car. Do that. Because then you get a parts list and everything when you're done. It's so good. You just insert the part when you're doing your design. Okay, so I ended up with 70. You've got to take the 70, you've got to split it between two, because you're going to have two, and that's going to equal 35 pounds. So just as sure as God made little green apples, 35 pounds is between the two values. So I can get a 30-pound spring, or I can get a 40-pound spring. So I've opted in this case to go for the 40-pound spring. And if I find it to be too much, I can always go back to the 30. On the light side, the absolute lightest that this could be is some value between the two springs that I could get, and the heavy side is between the two values I can get here. So I've opted to go for the slightly heavier spring. That'll just make the trunk come up a little bit more quickly. It's not going to be, so it's not going to sit statically. Again, this is just going to be able to have it rest, right? So the forces would be equilibrated at that point. So if I applied 35 pounds to this, if it was really 4.2 kilograms, it's getting too complicated. You get what I mean? It's just going to sit there. If you'd like it to come up, you need more than that. Right, so you need more. So this is a good decision. Over here, we'll go ahead and purchase this stuff from McMaster Car, get it in, and then see how this all works. Okay, so pretty exciting day to get the parts in from Send Cut Send. These took all of 4 days to get. So really from Canada, that's awfully good. Just to show you, it doesn't take a whole lot to get a really good fitting, nice looking part. So that's going to be the bracket where the one end of the gas spring attaches to. The problem wasn't so much this bracket. You know, I can make that easily enough. I mean, sure, I'm not going to get the curve nice, and it's not going to come with almost no work. The tough one to make is this one. Now, I'm aware that you can get angle brackets for gas springs. I can buy them from any number of suppliers, but I can't get them exactly the right dimension that I need for this. Of course, nothing off the shelf is ever going to be exactly the right dimension. Okay, so here's the gas spring that I've got to make the whole thing work. and they come with threaded. They come with a threaded ball, so I'm going to thread the parts to put the ball in. But then again, when I was in the CAD system, I worked out that I actually needed a washer for a shim. So on both sides, I sort of need a washer on each side. So I need to put one of these in. So I had Send-Cut Send make those up as well. So not only can they do the bending and the laser cutting, they can make little washers, and they put them in a nice little package for me. If you've never ordered anything from Send-Cut Send, don't forget we have a landing page. I will throw the link up in the corner, and we'll get you 15% off. I love the way they do the packaging, like the origami and the putting it together so nice and neatly is just, I love that kind of stuff. Anyway, here I am TIG welding everything together. So this is just, this is cold rolled steel. I do prefer to work with cold rolled steel, not only because the bends are nicer and it's just less work. There's no mill scale. There's nothing to clean. I did clean these parts off with acetone first before I did any of the weld operations and other things. But I am delighted with the quality of the work that I get from Send-Cut Send. It's so fast. It gets here so quickly. It's unbelievable to me. Anyway, so we're just getting the final little details knocked off on these parts, and they should be just about ready to go. Okay, so we're ready to get the test parts put into the car. You can see how everything's finished up. I'm very pleased as always. So an M8 hole here, 5/16, whatever. And I put the captive nuts on, just a little weld into those. Tricky to do, but it's fun. Anyway, it's all done. And I managed to find a method for getting the junk off my bench. And I managed to find a method for getting the bracket welded onto the arm so that it's in a consistent location. That's got to be the same side to side, or else things, I guess, they probably won't work very well. And all I was trying to do here, once again, was I know where the down position is because I set it. I set the down position to be sitting on this stop. And then what I wanted to do was get these two pivots as close to the same distance apart as I could, so that they're a right angle, right? So that we're not creating forces going wildly off in all directions. We just have them heading in the one direction, which makes the math for figuring out how we're going to get the right spring easier. Anyway, you can kind of get the idea of how this is all going to go together and why I needed the little spacers that I have, and everything else was to get all of this to fit together kind of nicely. That was the idea, was to have this look as stock as possible. Again, I sent all the parts to Send-Cut Send, and even in Canada it took all of 4 days to get them here, which is no time at all, really. For laser cut parts, it's ridiculous. And it saves quite a lot of time on the fabrication side of things. Again, you might think it's, you know, excessive or whatever for your project, but really it's not. As long as you can figure out how to do the doodles, and most of that's pretty easy. Lots of great videos up on how to do that work. Anyway, so there's all the pieces that we have for the car. Now the deck lid sits about here, right? So the bottom of the rear parcel shelf, I suppose, in the car sits here. This would be in the fully open position, so the hinge would be way open like that. And I set it up so that the end of that gas cylinder is not going to foul on any of the parts. And you know, just like everything, there's nothing in the stock world that's going to be just right. I wanted that pivot at 65 millimeters. I get there's 50 mils. There's lots of stock bits and pieces, but you can never get exactly the right part. And the fun stuff is being able to take your base drawing, right? And like that part took me about 2 seconds to draw. And there it is, a little reinforcing plate. So that's going to sandwich everything together. All right, so sandwich, it doesn't need it, but it probably, who knows. And then we'll just run the M6 bolts through that, and we're done. Okay, so let's go back to the car, install it, and see how it all works. It all looks easy until you actually have to do it. So I've got to get this. Those are the seatbelt brackets I built years ago. They haven't even flash rusted yet. Nice. So you got to get the seatbelt brackets out of the way, because that's where I'm going to need the bracket for the gas spring to hang. And then I got the bright idea that I would just clamp it in the up position. Sure, this sounds like great fun. And just spot the holes, drill them up, and away we go. Of course, it didn't work. I'm just going to let you watch. And then we'll come back and talk about it. Well, I'm back at the back again. So the first time I drilled a hole, what I had done was I set the hinge up, and then I put a clamp on it. I didn't think I'd put too much pressure on it. And then I attached the spring and the other bracket, and I thought, well, this is going to be fine, because that's good. But it turns out that you can pretty significantly overclock this, I guess, or something. Because when I let it all go, I couldn't get this hinge, wouldn't go all the way down. Oh, for heaven's sake. Anyway, so it wouldn't go all the way down. I've measured the stroke again. I've got 11 centimeters worth of stroke, which is more than enough for the spring that I have. So I think all I have is it's a little bit too far forward, and I just have to move the spring back, because I need it to get into the down position, for heaven's sake. I don't care if it doesn't get all the way to the stop on the up. If it's here or there, that's not going to make any difference in my life overall. But making these kinds of mistakes always bugs the heck out of me, but I always show you too. So, you know, these things just happen. So I've welded the hole shut, and then I've just tossed a little bit of machinist blue on it again. I'll scribe a center line here, put the hole marks in, re-drill the holes. This just takes minutes to do. But I'm also running out of back seat. Like, you know, if I got a longer stroked cylinder, and I shouldn't need it, right? Like, I've got a 12 point, what is it? Like, it's 12.5 centimeters worth of stroke, and I've got 11 centimeters worth of move, so I should have 1.5 centimeters worth of extra, if the math is right. I know it is. So, but at some point, I'll end up with a cylinder, if I get a longer one, and I'll run out of back seat, because the back seat's right here, and I'm already getting into, well, I've got lots left, but anyway, we don't want to push it here. We just want to be able to get this stupid thing done. Okay, let's go drill some holes and see if we can not make a mess of it. So before I powder coat the parts, I've actually put them all in the oven at, if I can get them out of the oven. I put them in there at 450 degrees for about 45 minutes, and then I've let them cool. And that's just an outgassing step. Again, there's oils and crap. They come out a beautiful gold color when you do it right. So anyway, they're now ready to blast, because we should have no problems with bits of oil and things coming out of these now. So we'll install some bolts in the hollow sections, plug up what we need to plug up, get them blasted, and then we're ready to go ahead with some powder coat epoxy for these ones. Never done that before. And just a little work later, and we're all nice and clean. That's as clean as I've ever seen these parts. So these are looking really good. They're going to be a little challenge to get them powdered because of the various angles and things. And all I have is just the standard Eastwood little oven. And then I've got the rest of my powder coat set up. Is a metal bar with the lead attached and the regular dual voltage powder coat system from Eastwood. So, you know, no advertising there. It works. It's fine. The powders in this case, so the powder we're going to use is an epoxy from Prismatic Powders. So we'll see how it works. First time I've ever done it. Okay, let's get her loaded up and ready to go. If there's any powder experts out there, give me some tips. I'm still fighting the pressure. I've got a regulator on this, but I think it's still way too much pressure. And I've got it down to where that's where Eastwood says it's supposed to be. It's also an epoxy powder, which it did seem to sort of, it was different than the polyesters that I've sprayed before. So I don't know, maybe a little less air. And it was super challenging to get this done, but then you get to watch me do hilarious things, which is always fun. So I hadn't actually seen if I could fit these in the oven before. And I'm putting them in the oven and I clobber them, which of course knocks half the powder off. And I'm too lazy to take them out one at a time and do it. And I thought, well, this will be fun. Let's see if I can get all those spots touched up that way. And it worked. It's terrifying. And when you're done with the powder, even though like half of it's going on my floor right now, just out with the vacuum, tidy it up, and we're done. Well, that was a lot of fun to get done. I got to remember to maybe pay a little bit more attention, but I bonked the parts on the way into the oven, and anyway, that's what necessitated the hilarity, but I think they all turned out all right, actually. Anyway, I'll get them out of here once they cool off, and I'll give you a better look at them. Don't forget to clean out your holes. I know I had the holes capped, but some of them I actually just forgot. So these ones I forgot to do. So get the tap and die set out, run the tap through the powder, and get it all cleaned up. So they were fine. Little extra work, but I'm learning. All right, now that the parts have cooled, I'm pretty happy with the way those turned out. Like there's nothing really all that wrong with them. There's a few spots that were really hard to get, and I think it's electrically, the static charge has a hard time getting into some of these really tight corners. I'm not real experienced doing this, first time for much of it, but I'm pretty happy with the way they turned out overall. They look lovely. They feel really good. So you can tell they're kind of hard. And for now, this is more than good enough. This is just to hold it while we're waiting to paint the car. So this will get a coat of primer, and that'll touch up any of the other little, errors and things over time. But, the hinge is still working. Everything is still fine. So yeah, that's a wrap. What a pile of work. But hey, it was well worth it to see the end result. Super happy with that. Okay, so here we are finished, right? So there's the completed hinge part, and you've seen the brackets, right? So the powder coating actually worked out really, really well. I am so happy with this result. It's not even funny. I've never powder coated with epoxy before. I know my spray settings still aren't quite right with the gun. I'm learning. We'll get there. But in the meantime, the finish is great. Like, I don't see any flaws. There's no problems. It's absolutely bull strong. You can't scratch it. Like, you can give it a try, but it's not going anywhere. So this is going to hold those parts from getting any flash rust or other problems while we're finishing up the build. As you know, it takes me a long time to get anything done. But hey, we're one more part towards being finished. So we can get a trunk that goes up and down now, and we're very happy with that. Anyway, like and subscribe if you're not subscribed. Tell a friend, right? Again, we're not really here to try to drive the algorithm. We're just here to try to make sure we're sharing as much good information as we can. It takes a lot of work to get the videos put together. It takes a lot of work just to do the work. And don't forget, keep your stick on the ice.